G'day, Francis Leach here from Australian Unions, and it's been a massive week for everyone in the movement. Michele is the president of the ACTU, and she joins me to talk about the climate bill and the implications for Australian workers. Michele, it has been huge, hasn't it?
It's been a really big week, and hi everybody. Francis, we've been up in Canberra. We're actually up in Canberra with this amazing gang of union members from all sorts of different unions and across the country, and that was fantastic to see them in Parliament talking about what matters for working people.
This bill is supported by the movement. What is it about it that has won the support of unionists and workers across the country?
Because what we know about climate change is that there's not one job, one industry, one community that's not affected by it. This is not something that's happening in the future. This is something we're living the reality of every day in Australia. And we've seen those impacts of things like the fires, the floods, but even on a sort of day-to-day basis, extreme heat really impacts so many different workers. You talk to the nurses and the healthcare workers about that, and it pushes up people who are being affected by that and makes their job even harder. Teachers talk about how hard it is to teach in classrooms where they can't cool them down and what that means for kids learning. And of course, if you work outside, it's dramatic, the impact. So we know that climate change is having a global impact that is going to be worse for working class people. The poorer you are, the more likely it's going to affect your food, the more likely it's going to mean that you lose your homes or live somewhere that isn't safe.
So the argument that the opponents of a bill like this will put is that reducing emissions inevitably means a reduction in jobs. Are they wrong?
They are wrong, because it'll mean a change in jobs. Yeah. And we've already seen that. So again, they try and say to people, oh, be scared of change. Well, workers are living the impact of change. We've seen more than a third of coal-fired power stations close already because of the impact of this. So you can't say to those workers and their communities, oh, don't worry, it'll all be all right. That the market globally, the companies, the global and Australian companies that own those power generating plants that have been reliant on fossil fuel are acting, and they've been acting for a decade or more, and workers in their communities are paying the price because it's not properly planned. They're not engaged and involved in saying, well, what does that mean for our job, our kids' jobs, our community and our future? And that's the critical thing. Like, change is happening. We've got to put workers at the centre of it.
So that's a really good point, isn't it? This is about making sure that workers who are going to be absolutely central to this huge change that we're undergoing are in the conversation, are driving the conversation, that their needs are met, and that when their workers aren't just a sideshow.
Oh, and just an afterthought. Yeah. Like, honestly, these are huge companies that have made massive profits over a long period of time. We need to make sure that those companies are investing, as well as government and public investment, in diversifying the jobs and economies in those communities, and not waiting, not saying, oh, we'll do that one day. That's going to happen now. Like, we need to be making sure that we're making the jobs of the future now. And if you think about renewable energy, and there's a huge potential to create jobs there, but we've learned and we know that the jobs that have been, for example, in the fossil fuel industry in the past started off as really dangerous, bad jobs. And it was unions that organised workers and fought to lift the standards, the pay and conditions, the safety of those jobs, and have succeeded in doing that. We're not going to forget that. In the creation of new renewable energy jobs, they've got to be based in those same communities. So you're creating opportunities for people that are there and their kids, but they've also got to be good, well-paid, safe union jobs.
Yeah, so this is interesting. It's almost like a chance to reset the terms of the economy and make secure, decent, permanent work an absolutely central feature to it.
Yeah, it's the bottom line, isn't it? Yeah. Because we can plan this, and this is what's been missing, and it's a shocking indictment of that previous Conservative government that they abandoned, really. They talked like they cared about workers and jobs. Scratch the surface. It was not true. It was a lie, and it was a vicious lie, because it just meant that jobs were being lost, change was happening, workers had no say in it, there was no proper planning and thinking about what we needed to do to make sure that people weren't really badly affected, and it was workers and their families that paid the price for that. It was a lie to those workers and to the Australian community that we didn't have to act.
So we've still got a chance to reset, but how much damage has a decade of inaction on this issue done to our prospects of getting this right? Or are we still in a good place to be able to do it?
Look, it's done a lot of damage. I don't want to understate it. A huge missed opportunity. We could have been in front of the game in so many of these renewable energy jobs, but it's not too late. Yeah. So we did some work last year with, in fact, the Business Council of Australia, as well as the Australian Conservation Foundation and WWF, about where are the renewable energy jobs and the export jobs. And it showed that with the right plan and investment, you could create 400,000 jobs in Australia.
Good, decent, secure pay.
Yeah, good jobs in renewable energy, but you had to get it right. It's not just going to be a wish. Like, it requires government planning. It requires the involvement of unions and employers in this. It requires really strong and clear obligations on employers about what they must do. And of course, it means listening to local communities who really understand what's possible. You know, you can't impose this from the top. You've got to talk to people in those communities about what is possible, and it's got to be happening now, and you've got to build a bridge. You know, you can't just say, oh, you know, wish and a prayer, it'll happen one day.
Those conversations are already starting, aren't they? There are different organisations and community groups that are already springing up in places like the Hunter Valley and elsewhere, where they're having those conversations with workers and communities.
Yeah, they are, and that's good, but we need to have a national coordination of this. That's why unions talk about the importance of the climate change bill. Like, we need those targets, we need to be clear, we need to be ambitious about what's going to happen and how we're going to meet those targets in Australia and globally. And, you know, our trading partners are already in front of us on this. You know, like, we just committed to 43% in the bill that went to the House of Reps this week. Most of our trading partners had committed to 50%. So, you know, we've got to pay attention, because they're going to get the jump on us if we aren't setting our settings right too. So we've got to get the law right. We've got to get the government working with unions and employers to have a plan about this in a really organised, fair and fast way, and then work closely with local communities and state governments and local governments to make it happen. So it's a big job to do. It's not too late, but we can't wait.
It's also a great opportunity, and I know it's something you and the movement have talked about a lot, is the idea of a new manufacturing sector, which is built off the back of new opportunities in a net zero economy. And, you know, having that, one of the things we learned through the pandemic, wasn't it, that we are at the end of a lot of supply chains. We need a level of self-reliance here, and we can be a superpower in that regard in terms of what we can produce here with our incredible natural resources.
That's so true. You think about, you know, we don't want to just... there's new opportunities in terms of mining many of the minerals and things that are needed in renewable energy, but we don't want to just be digging them up and sending them offshore. Like, we want to have the manufacturing jobs here in Australia that actually take those materials and creates what's needed in terms of the technology and the goods that are required in the renewable energy future. We need the jobs that are going to go into upgrading the grid. Like, this is massive amount of work to make all of this work. And of course, we need the jobs that are the service jobs all around that, and the support for the communities that deal with those change and realise it's real people that you're working with here and working with people. So there's a lot of work, jobs that can be created, but I reckon I'm going to say the absolute core of this, and we know this if you look around the world, some countries have done it heaps better than others, is you put unions and workers in the middle of this decision making.
So you were in Canberra, as you said, with lots of union members and delegates there. What was your general sense? Was there a sense of optimism from them about this opportunity?
Look, there's a lot to be done. There's generally a sense of optimism about we've got a new government, but also we're unionists, and we know that as much as it's great to have gotten rid of the Morrison government and to be getting on with making Australia a fairer and better place for workers, you know, wages, cost of living, insecure work, we know how urgent it is that change happens to address this. So they were some of the things we're talking about, as well as how climate affects all of that. But these things are connected, because If we are going to get better, more secure jobs, then we should use what's happening in terms of change of climate and change of energy to make sure we drive down power prices, get a better energy system that's a renewable one we can rely on in the future, and good quality jobs out of it. So there's a connection, but there's a lot of work to do. So yeah, optimistic I'd say, but also an eye on we need change, we need it fast.
Just to finish, the bill goes off to a Senate inquiry, as most of the big bills do. What will you be looking for as the President of the ACTU to come from that?
Well, we want to make sure that we raise these issues, that we make... There's some new members of Parliament and some of them have been very vocal about issues to do with climate change. They don't all understand what we've been talking about today, Francis. So we want to use the opportunity to make sure that the people who are voting on this bill understand how critical it is, not just to have a number as a target, as important as that is, and we support it, but to get to the detail of what it means for workers and their families and communities and commit to that fair approach to the transition and the change. Australia's part of the Paris Agreement was we're meant to have done this. 46 other countries in the world have got plans about it. We haven't. We want those plans developed. We want the support. We know the government's committed to this. We want the support of the Parliament about it as well.
Michele, great to talk to you. Plenty of work to be done. If you want to join the movement and be part of that change, you can. AustralianUnions.org.au is where to go, and we'll catch you again soon.